you know? I would say the Egyptians and all of these guys, every single one of the secret societies we've got going back through China, Japan, US, Mongolia, all of these secret societies relate to the fact that 1,000 years ago, we were being invaded by aliens and there was a need to respond to them. And they knew the aliens were making hybrids. They didn't call them that, but fake humans, doppelgangers, personas, all of these various different words. They knew that they had slaves that they called fairies or elves or gnomes. They knew that they used these slaves to abduct people and take children and stuff. And I think the secret societies were a way of holding knowledge among people that could be vetted to be human. That's why the DNA bloodline, right? Because a lot of that and a lot of the secret societies excluded anybody that had ever been abducted. And as part of the initiation process, you were kept within the first 3 ranks of masonry if you were part of a clan that had abductions. Only if you were not were you allowed to rise up. Now, it was later taken over. The whole Masonic thing was taken over by the elites, who may well be abductees themselves. But this brings us back to several different other kinds of things in history. The coneheads, the fact that we had conehead pharaohs, and we had coneheads in Europe that ruled all the way through from the 800s all the way into the 1500s. You would see portraits of all the rulers of the various different kingdoms and principalities and so on, with coneheads, no hair, weird headdresses trying to disguise it, etc. And they died out. Okay, maybe they were an attempt by the insects to make a hybrid that could rule us directly. And it didn't happen, right? We're hard to get along with as psychic beings. We cause a lot of the more telepathic kind of beings a great deal of pain to be around us because we're so psychically chaotic. And we love it. You know, nothing better than a good dust up, in my opinion, you know, chaos in its primal form where nothing is known about the outcome. That does not suit these insects at all. When I was doing these mescaline journeys, and with me, mescaline was the drug I took for far journeys to this other space. Psilocybin could also get you there, but you had to go through the environment as opposed to a direct. So it was like with psilocybin, you were walking along the train track and you would eventually get there. But with mescaline, you were riding a train right to the destination, and you just didn't even bother with the environment on either side. But when I interacted with the insects, I was appalled that anything could exist that had no emotion like that. They were annoyed at me. I was interrupting this older one's experiments with whatever the hell he was doing, and he couldn't get rid of me. And I was just intrigued enough to stay there because it was one of my very first far journey experiences. And so I stayed there and annoyed him. And to be fair, you know, I'm kind of a raspy personality with an authority complex. And so he pissed me off. I have an emotional response. So it was like, up yours, I'm staying. Now the younger insect, I learned a great deal from him because he was very chatty. He was perhaps only several hundred years old, whereas the other guy might have been several tens of thousands of years old, as far as I know. He was ancient, especially in his thinking. The young guy wasn't more hip or more aware of things. He was just more curious because he hadn't filled his knowledge banks up, or its knowledge banks up, right? And so we interacted, and I soon learned that in that space, if you just give, you're not going to get anything. Okay. So it's a trade. It's transactional. So if he wanted to know something, I would demand an answer to a question from him. And so he tumbled to that real quick, and we got along pretty famously. And so when I later on met the guy with the emotions on top of his skin, which didn't mean anything to me, and we communicated telepathically with words, I knew it was transactional. And so I did business with him, asking him tons of questions, learned lots of stuff that actually led to the formation of much of my software related to predictive linguistics, because this guy with his emotional sheen was all about how emotions work and how the vagus nervous system works and how the linguistic center is tied into it and through the glands of the heads and all of this information. He was just full of it, because all hominids, once you reach a certain level of vagus nervous system development, are very, very, very similar, even if the outside cage is different, right? He had more of a square head. He had like this, not like Klingon or anything kind of a thing, but like a big sartorial ridge depth. I mean, it was a dent that separated the two parts. So he's very pleasant looking, and but solid and sort of brutish in that sense, right? Now, also, we have to acknowledge that in this space, we project and build our bodies with our minds. And so you can't do fine detail, still pay attention, still be stoned on the psychedelic, and still learn things. So you project out sort of what you look like, right? Because it was rude to not do that. But if you wanted to be there and not do that, you're just a big sphere. It's just your mind in a big sphere looking around, examining, and so on. And then you can extrude your body out of that sphere, as this guy did. And he and I had a couple of conversations, maybe as many as 9 or 10 over the course of a year or more. It was either the same being or the guy was like, the being that I dealt with each time knew what I'd talked with the other being with. So they may telepathically, he may have shared the conversation with everybody, and they all just sort of looked alike. And that's another thing about the insects. They all look alike. They're all third order beings. You can't tell one from another. Facial expressions, they don't have them. Their faces all look alike. They're just slightly larger, slightly bigger, but they're basically the same mold over and over and over again. And
do you think there's something making them?
That's the whole thing, see? I can't say anything about their origin because they don't talk about it. Even the young one wouldn't answer questions about their species that might betray things that he thought would make their species vulnerable. So he knew I was an enemy long before I knew I was an enemy. Because when I was interacting with him, I had no concept of the invasion going on Earth, the fact that these bugs were here on Earth. I wasn't talking to a bug that was here on Earth. I was talking to a bug that was in this alternate space. They may have actually had their corporeal bodies back here as I did, but I have no way of knowing that one way or another. And he didn't give any indication that he was a bug from Earth, but he did give me an indication that I now recognize was that he was wary of me and he was wary of disclosing things. But you know, the thing about psychedelic use for those of us that do achieve shamanic levels, right? And so you didn't smoke anywhere near enough divinorum to achieve a shamanic level. You reached the level of the dissolution of the body and you did not go any further. You've got to take a lot of the stuff and you've got to go through that. Your body has to die on you. And this is what gets most people that use these psychedelics is they can't take that, okay? Because your body dissolves and your mind is quite convinced that your body is dead, and it is the most horrific kind of feeling, both for liberation and for hellish mortality that you can ever imagine. And having done it, I would never undo it, but each and every time it is fantastically difficult to get through that stage, and you never did. Okay, so the shamanic level of these kind of things take you beyond that level of dissolution, and you get into an entirely different space. And so, but it's curious that a lot of the activities in that space are being conducted by and replicating much of the same kind of energies that we find down here on Earth, so to speak.
You know, that's very interesting. And I found out from my grandma before she passed, I said, do I have Native American roots? Because I certainly don't look like it. And my family's about as white as it gets. And she says, well, yes, you do. Your great grandma was a medicine woman and she was a shaman, and she actually saved my triple great grandpa's life. He almost died with pneumonia, and the Western doctors said that he was going to maybe have 24 hours. Well, she came over, mixed some stuff up from the cabinets, and the next day he was walking around and they ended up falling in love. So I guess I'm a byproduct of that. And the DNA figured, it's like your DNA holds information. But dude, it's interesting because you say that, Cliff, because the last time I did it, there was actually like these, I call them guardians, because I was going like in these loops. I was going in these, like, it was like a circle. I was going down, and then I thought I was going to be stuck there forever. And then I came back up, and then I went down, and I thought I was going to be stuck there forever. And then I came back up. So as I was going down, like, okay, I'll never do it again. And then I'm coming back up, but it's so much fun. It's so much fun. And
right.
These things were like, don't ever do this again.
Those are the machine elves.
And I was going to do it again. A few months later, I was going to do it again. And I went onto this forum, and this guy, just out of the blue, Cliff, totally weird, man. This guy was on this forum chatting, and he sounded like he had a mental handicap by the way he was talking. And people were kind of making fun of him in the chat. And I'm like, quit giving this guy a hard time, man. He's just talking about his experiences. Well, guess what? This dude did salvia, what do you call it? Divinorum or
Divinorum.
Divinorum. He did Salvia Divinorum, and it fried his brain. This dude was married with kids, making over 100 grand a year, happy life, happy wife. He did that stuff. It fried his brain. Now he lives with his parents. He lost his family. He's mentally handicapped the rest of his life. How weird, out of the blue, the same night that I was going to do that again, months later, I go on to a forum, and this forum doesn't have anything to do with that crap. It was a conspiracy forum. So just that, the fact that guy was there talking, it was like,
okay, so no. Right. Well, see, it may not have been universe. It might have been the bugs. Okay. See, because you may not have seen that forum. You may not have ever read that. It may have been planted in your brains to cause the specific response that it got, which was that you didn't do the stuff anymore. I'm not suggesting you do it, okay? Because in order to do that, you need to have gone through the curandero training of the Mexican brujos, they're healers, because you never take the divinorum straight. You never smoke that stuff straight because there's no ameliorating chemicals in there to prevent that brain harm. So you could indeed have contacted, seen just someone writing about the harm that was caused to him, because the weed can cause harm. That's why they call it loco weed. It drives horses crazy, kills cows, this sort of thing, right? Because it scrambles the neural pathways and they don't recover. It's very much like in that aspect of it, it's like intense cocaine use. If you do lots and lots and lots of cocaine, you build in new neural pathways that are incredibly difficult to overcome to get back to, quote, what you were before, or normal. So you got to be careful of these psychedelics, right? And you need to have someone who knows what the hell they're doing with them. And you don't really need to experiment with the strange, it's kind of, I mean, it's worse than like gulping Tide Pods, I think, but because it does have long-term stuff. However, let's assume—
I was thinking, hey, I can just go to the store. It's totally legal. It's no big deal,
right.
And
but let's see. You could actually try it.
Like, ah!
Right. But see, now, and here's the thing. You might be an abductee even now, right? Or they may be waiting for something, for some life experience, like production of children, or some kind of thing that in some way gets them what they want. Here's the curious part. So these beings are capable of incredibly fancy genetic manipulation, yet we're involved in a breeding program. The two don't go together, right? Usually if you're going to do GMOs, you get the GMO response in the very next generation. You don't need any intervening generations. So this is a curiousness that does keep reappearing, is that there is this breeding program going on. Another curiousness is that they need female hosts for the embryo for at least 11 weeks or so, until the end of the first trimester. They need to have the embryo in a human host during that period of time. Now, I suspect it has to do with the flood of hormones that go through during that period of time, that do a level of subtle genetic engineering that makes that body a potential receptacle for a soul. I think that's a tentative conclusion. With the action is that every single one of the hybrids goes 11 weeks in a human. The action that we can know from this is that they're extracted. We know that there's some need for this, because the abductees themselves are basically told there's a need for this level of interaction with a human mother, but it's not needed thereafter. So they're after a specific set of hormonal responses that occur within those first 11 weeks and not thereafter. This, if I knew more about the gestation biology, might tell me more, but I haven't investigated that yet, because there's so many different other things to investigate about this. And bear in mind, I actually now think that I'm at war, that all of us are at war with this species that intends to take over the planet, if not replace us. I also, again, have to point out, I think our military is at war, and I think our military knows this. Now, also, this would substantiate some of the whistleblowers that have gone to people like Linda Moulton Howe, or some of the people that are not talked about by Richard Dolan. Okay, it would also validate some of the experiences that I heard from Jay Widener, because the military will go and tell these people some things, and they'll tell them just out of sheer frustration and fear, because the military is engaged in a war that is unlike any other kind of war they've ever even thought of engaging. okay, because they can't do things. You can't go and shoot holes in these guys. You can't betray even that you know you're being invaded, because it might cause them to change their patterns of activity. Yet you've got to be really careful, and you've got to think like fifth and sixth dimensional chess in a lot of these things, about what might happen if the aliens respond this way, and you have no clue as to what is motivating their responses, because they are not like humans. They're not like humans in a way that is so fundamentally different that we might as well be at war with, intelligent rocks that would sneak up in the middle of the night and clunk you over the head or something, right? And we'd have no reason as to why the rocks are doing. We can't even talk to the rocks. We can't even find out which rock is sentient until they actually get up and knock you over the head in the middle of the night, and then it's too late. So this is the kind of battles that our military is fighting. And I think a lot of the actions in the secret space program, in the unacknowledged projects that are hidden in the holes in the ground, are all going towards this war that we're under. It also explains the 10 to 100 times amounts of money that we spend for security and secrecy over the amount of money we're spending on reverse engineering their technology. Because we don't really need this level of secrecy if it's only us humans that we're worried about. But we would need super levels of security to keep our weapons, or even our thinking about this invasion, absolutely out of the heads of the insects and their minions, if indeed our military thought we were at war with them. So the military is spending money as though we are at war with these space aliens, and they're doing everything they can to keep their strategies and tactics hidden from our population so that the space aliens don't find out about it.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Earth. It's a trip.